The phone rang at 7 in the morning. It was my daughter, Lisa. Her voice was a broken thing, all air and shattered glass. He won, Mum. The judge gave Mark full custody. They're saying I'm unstable, unfit. I sat down hard on my kitchen chair, the vinyl cold through my housecoat. My only grandchild, my sweet Sammy, gone. Handed over to the man who'd spent 2 years draining my daughter's spirit and bank account. From that first breath, I knew what I had to do. I had to get Sammy back for Lisa. Her face showed the price every time I saw her, a slow vanishing. The pressure came 3 days later. Mark, my ex-son-in-law, stood on my porch. He didn't come in. You'll respect the court's decision, Helen. No more weekend rescues. No more filling Lisa's head with nonsense. You see Sammy only when I say. It's for his safety. He smiled then, a thin, lawyerly smile. I just nodded, my hands folded tight in my lap. A week passed with supervised 1-hour visits in the park. Sammy was quiet, clinging to Mark's hand. Then, this afternoon, everything changed. My old friend Marge from my quilting circle called. Her nephew works dispatch for the county sheriff. She'd heard something, she said, her voice low and urgent. There was a report last night, a possible child abduction from Mark's neighborhood, but it was closed within an hour. Officially, a false alarm. My blood went still. A false alarm. While Mark had Sammy. I thanked Marge and hung up. I looked at the family photo on my wall, at Sammy's gap-toothed smile. Mark wanted to break Lisa forever. What better way than to make her believe her son was dead? But a report exists, a digital footprint. I picked up my purse. I needed to see the public log at the sheriff's satellite office before it closed. They couldn't stop a grandmother from asking about police activity in her grandson's neighborhood. I walked out, locking the door behind me. The sun was too bright. I realized I was planning my first move against a man who might have already planned the perfect crime. The satellite office was a beige room with a high counter and the smell of old coffee. A young deputy named Daniels listened with polite boredom as I explained my concern. A rumor in the neighborhood, I said, about a child. My grandson lived nearby. I was just an anxious grandma. He tapped at his computer. I see the call. 9:42 p.m., from a neighbor reporting a disturbance, a possible struggle near a vehicle. Units responded. Contact was made with the resident. It was a misunderstanding. The child was fine. Case closed. He gave me a practiced, dismissive smile. My purpose became solid. Get that neighbor's name. To do it, I had to keep my composure. I had to stay a harmless old woman. Oh, thank goodness, I fluttered. Which neighbor? I'd like to thank them for being so vigilant. It takes a village, you know. Deputy Daniels's smile faded. That's confidential, ma'am. Protected information. It was a wall of rules. He stood up, signaling the end. I left, the automatic doors wheezing shut behind me. I sat in my old sedan, hands on the wheel. A misunderstanding, a struggle seen. A child declared fine after a brief chat. It was too neat. Mark was a lawyer. He knew how to talk to police. The shift came from my own memory. Sammy had a secret. A hiding place he'd shown me last summer in Mark's new townhouse complex behind a loose panel in the bedroom closet floor. For my treasures, Nana, he'd whispered. If something was wrong, if he was scared, would he leave a sign there? It was a child's logic, but it was all I had. I started the car. I wouldn't go to Mark's. He'd never let me in. But the complex had a community clubhouse. I could park there, walk the paths like a visiting grandmother. I could see his unit from the sidewalk. I just needed a look, a sense. I pulled into traffic. My plan was fragile, built on a child's hidey hole and a police report that didn't exist. But as I drove, a cold certainty settled in my stomach. That deputy had been too quick to reassure. He'd called the resident, not the father. He'd used the singular. Mark had been alone. The Autumn Grove townhouses were quiet in the mid-afternoon sun. I parked at the clubhouse, as planned. My heart hammered against my ribs as I walked the clean concrete path. Mark's unit was end of row, with a small patio. The blinds were drawn, no sign of life. All I wanted was to get close enough to see the patio door, maybe catch a glimpse inside. The risk was the fear of being seen by Mark or a nosy neighbour. I carried a grocery bag I'd prepared, a box of tissues, a water bottle. If stopped, I was lost, looking for a friend's unit. I was 10 feet from his patio when it happened. The front door of the next unit opened, and a woman in yoga pants came out, dragging a recycling bin. She saw me and paused. "Can I help you?" Her tone was more suspicion than courtesy. I offered my most grandmotherly smile. "Oh, I'm all turned around. My friend Janice said Unit 14, but this says 12. I must have the wrong building cluster." I gestured vaguely behind me. She relaxed slightly. 14 is around the corner, other building, same layout. She nodded at Mark's unit. "Nobody's home there anyway. Guy's been gone a couple days. Saw him loading suitcases into his car yesterday morning." Gone. My breath caught. "With his little boy?" I asked, trying to sound casually interested. She shrugged. "Didn't see the kid. Just him and the bags." She wheeled her bin away. Her casual comment changed everything. Gone for days. Luggage. Without Sammy? Or with him? I walked back to my car, mind racing. If he'd taken Sammy on a trip, why the abduction report? To create a record of a threat, a danger? To set the stage? I drove to the only place that made sense. Lisa's apartment. I found her on the couch, curtains drawn, a blanket over her legs. I didn't mention the police or the neighbour. I simply asked, "Did Mark tell you he was going out of town?" She looked up, eyes hollow. "No. Why?" A flicker of fear. "Is Sammy with him?" "I don't know, sweetheart," I said, sitting beside her. "But we're going to find out." I took her hand. It was ice cold. My own fear was a living thing in my chest. Mark wasn't just hiding Sammy. He was preparing the final act. And I had nothing but a suspicion and a missing neighbour's name. I needed that name. I looked at my daughter's broken face. The law had failed her. I couldn't. Lisa remembered the neighbour. "Mrs. Gable?" she whispered. "Elderly lady. Lives directly across the courtyard. She always waved to Sammy." She dug through an old drawer and found an Autumn Grove directory from when she'd lived there. There it was. Evelyn Gable, Unit 27B. Now I had a direct line. Talk to Evelyn Gable before Mark could silence her. It was terrifying, tipping our hand, making us a target. But time was crushing. Mark was already gone. We drove back to Autumn Grove as dusk fell. Lisa waited in the car, phone ready to call 911. I walked to Unit 27B and knocked. A chain lock engaged, and one wary blue eye peered out. "Yes?" "Mrs. Gable? My name is Helen. I'm Sammy's grandmother, Lisa's mother." I saw recognition, then fear, flicker in her eye. "I know you called the police the other night. Please. I just need to know what you saw." She was silent for a long moment. Then the chain slid off. She opened the door just enough. She was tiny, bird-like, with a quilted housecoat. "He said it was a game," she said, her voice trembling. "That man. He carried the boy out, wrapped in a blanket. The boy was limp. I called. The police came. He told them it was a game, that Sammy was sleeping. They believed him. They left. My knees felt weak. Limp? Like a rag doll, she whispered. He put him in the back seat like a bag of groceries. She looked past me, terrified. He saw me watching. After the police left, he stood right there on his patio and looked at my window. He smiled. He knew I saw. Her terror was a tangible thing in the dim hallway. Mark had staged it perfectly, knowing a witness would be dismissed as a confused old woman. He had all the control. I thanked her, begged her to be safe, and stumbled back to the car. I told Lisa everything. She began to shake, silent sobs racking her body. He has him. He's done something to him. We don't know that, I said, gripping the steering wheel. He needs Sammy alive for now, for the illusion. But my own dawning realization was a terrible weight. This wasn't just about custody. This was a performance. And for a performance to be complete, it needs a finale. A body. My mind shied away from the thought. We needed proof, not a limp child seen from a distance. We needed to find where Mark had gone. And I knew, with a sickening drop in my stomach, that I had to get into his townhouse. Breaking into my ex-son-in-law's home was not in my nature, but standing in the dark parking lot, watching Lisa cry, I felt a new version of myself hardening. I had to find any clue to where Mark had taken Sammy. I risked my freedom, my clean record, my own sense of right. The silent phone in my purse pressed on me. What if Mark called Lisa right now with terrible news? What if we were too late? I had to move. I drove to an all-night hardware store. I bought a pair of thin leather gloves and a small flashlight. Lisa waited, a silent ghost in the passenger seat. "Mum, you can't," she kept saying, but her heart wasn't in it. She was out of hope. I was all she had. We parked a block away from Autumn Grove. The complex was asleep. I approached Mark's unit from the rear, through a narrow service alley. The patio door had a simple latch lock, an old trick from my late husband, who was always locking himself out. A stiff piece of plastic from a notebook binder slipped between the door and the frame. I worked it slowly, feeling the resistance. My hands shook. With a soft click, the latch slid back. I pushed the door open and stepped into the dark. The air was stale, cold. I flicked on my flashlight. The living room was eerily tidy. No toys. No sign a child lived here at all. I moved quickly to Sammy's bedroom. The bed was made. The closet was half empty. My heart sank. Then I remembered. The loose floorboard. I knelt, my joints protesting, and felt along the baseboard. My fingers found the slight gap. I pried it up. Inside the dusty space was a small green toy soldier and a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it with trembling, gloved hands. It was a child's drawing in Sammy's wobbly hand. A stick-figure man with an angry scribble for a face. Next to him, a small stick-figure boy. And above them, a lopsided rectangle with waves underneath. A car ferry. A boat. On the bottom, in letters he must have just learned to write, "Dad, go boat. Help, a boat." The drawing was a clue, a cry. Mark had taken him somewhere you go by boat. My mind raced. An island, a lake house, a coastal town. But which one? I heard a car engine outside, too close. A sweep of headlights grazed the window blinds. I froze. The engine cut off. A car door opened and closed. Footsteps crunched on the path toward the front door. Mark was back. The key rattled in the front door lock. I dropped the floorboard back into place, shoved the drawing into my pocket, and froze. The patio door behind me was still slightly ajar. The footsteps entered the living room. I was in the dark bedroom, with only the narrow closet for cover. I moved, slower than I wanted, every creak in my bones loud in my ears. I slipped into the closet, behind a row of Mark's hanging suit jackets. They smelled of cheap cologne. I pulled the door nearly shut, leaving a hairline crack to see out. The bedroom light snapped on. Mark stood in the doorway, not moving. He was alone. He held his phone to his ear. "No, he's settled. It's fine." A pause. He listened, then chuckled, a dry, unpleasant sound. "Her. She's already broken. Once it's done, she'll sign anything to make it stop. The house, the remaining accounts. She'll give it all up just for the privilege of believing it was an accident." My hand flew to my mouth to stifle a gasp. He was talking about Lisa, about breaking her completely, and it was the finale he was planning. "Tomorrow, as scheduled," Mark said. "The paperwork is all set. Just a tragic outing, a distracted moment. It happens." He ended the call and tossed his phone onto the bed. He walked to the closet. My heart hammered so violently I was sure he could hear it. He stopped inches from the slatted door. I saw his silhouette through the crack. He reached out, not for the handle, but to the shelf above. I heard the rustle of fabric. He was getting something. A moment later, he stepped back, a small duffel bag in his hand. He unzipped it, checked inside. I saw the gleam of plastic, a child's life jacket, bright orange. He zipped the bag, turned off the light, and left the room. I heard him go back to the living room, then the sound of the front door opening and closing again. He was leaving, taking the bag. I waited in the dark, counting to 100, the numbers jumbling in my fear. Then I crept out, crossed the bedroom, and peered through the blinds. His car was pulling away. He was gone again. I had to get out. But now I had more than a drawing. I had heard his plan. An accident. Tomorrow. On the water. I slipped out the patio door, closed it softly, and melted into the night-shaded alley. My whole body trembled, but my mind was clear and cold. I had until tomorrow to stop a murder disguised as a tragedy. I reached my car where Lisa waited, her face pale in the dashboard light. "We need a boat registry," I said, starting the engine. "And we need a lawyer who works at night." Lisa called her old divorce attorney, but he was unavailable. It was after hours. We were spinning wheels. I now had one focus: identify the boat from Sammy's drawing before sunrise. What we stood to lose was our sanity, racing against a clock we couldn't see. We went to my house. I spread a state map on the kitchen table. "Think," I said. "Did Mark ever talk about liking boats? A friend with a lake place?" Lisa shook her head, rubbing her temples. "He hated the water, said it was boring." She stopped. "But his new girlfriend, the one he was seeing before the custody hearing, she posted pictures on social media, on a boat, a big white one." It was a thread. Lisa, with trembling hands, scrolled through her phone. She found the woman's profile. Brittany. Her page was public. And there, from 2 months ago, was a series of photos. Mark, smiling awkwardly in a life jacket, on the deck of a large pontoon boat. The caption: "Sunset cruise on Silver Lake. Thanks, Uncle Jerry, for the boat." Silver Lake. It was a large reservoir about 90 minutes north, a popular recreational spot. My finger traced the roads to it on the map. "Uncle Jerry," I whispered. We had a location and a potential boat owner, but the dread returned instantly. How could we prove anything? We were 2 women with a hearsay story from an elderly neighbour and a child's drawing. The police had already dismissed one report. Then I remembered the gloves. I was still wearing the thin leather gloves from the break-in. I took them off slowly, a sick feeling in my stomach. I had left fingerprints nowhere, but I had taken something. I pulled the folded drawing from my pocket. It was evidence, but it was also stolen, obtained illegally. If I went to the police with it, Mark could turn the tables, accuse me of trespassing, of fabricating things. He was a lawyer. He would win. I looked at Lisa's hopeless face. The law was his shield. We had to use something else. "We need to find Uncle Jerry," I said. "Tonight." A quiet, desperate plan formed. We would drive to Silver Lake. We would find the marina, look for that pontoon boat. We would watch. It was all we could do. We got back in the car. The night was deep and dark. I drove, my eyes on the unspooling highway. Lisa slept fitfully in the passenger seat. As the first hint of grey touched the eastern sky, we saw the sign, Silver Lake Recreation Area, next exit. We were here. But as I turned off the highway, a patrol car was parked at the junction, its engine idling. The officer inside watched our car slow for the turn. He didn't move, but his presence was a warning shot across our bow. The lake was a small community. Strangers at dawn were noticed. I drove past the patrol car, my hands steady on the wheel, trying to look like a harmless, early-rising tourist. The marina wasn't hard to find. It was the only cluster of buildings on the lakeshore. I parked in a gravel lot designated for visitors. The sky was lightening to a soft pearl grey. We needed to find the boat from the photo without arousing suspicion. If we failed, we'd be asked to leave, or worse, Mark would be alerted. We were exposed here. The marina was quiet, just the gentle lap of water against docks. Boats of all sizes bobbed in their slips. Lisa and I walked slowly down the main dock, pretending to admire the vessels. My eyes scanned for a large white pontoon boat. The dread was a physical weight. Every sound made me jump. Then Lisa gripped my arm. She pointed, wordlessly. 3 docks over, at the far end. A big white pontoon boat with blue trim. The name was painted on the stern. R&R Retreat. It matched the boat in the Facebook photo. We couldn't get closer. The dock was gated with a combination lock. We stood there, staring. The boat looked empty, curtains drawn on its small cabin. Was Sammy inside? Was Mark? We had no way to know. The shift came from behind us, a voice, gravelly from sleep. "You ladies lost?" A man in a marina staff windbreaker stood there, holding a mug of coffee. He looked wary. I summoned a smile. "Oh, just admiring the boats. My late husband loved pontoons. That's a nice one there, the R&R Retreat." The man relaxed slightly. "Jerry's boat. He's got it rented out this week to some family." He took a sip of coffee. "Lucky family," I said, my heart pounding. "Getting this whole week on the water." "Nah, just today, I think. Picked up the keys yesterday afternoon. Said they'd be back by sundown." He shrugged and walked off toward the office. Today, sundown. The timeline matched what I'd overheard. An accident during a day trip. I looked at Lisa. Her eyes were wide with terror. We had confirmed the location and the day, but we had no proof of intent and no way to reach Sammy. We were spectators to a crime in the making. We retreated to the car. The sun was cresting the trees now, painting the lake in gold. It was going to be a beautiful day, the kind of day where terrible things happen because everyone is looking at the sunshine. Back in the car, we had a silent, frantic conference. Calling the police was useless without concrete evidence. We needed to see Sammy, to confirm he was here and in danger. We needed to witness the setup. A new idea formed, born of desperation. We could rent a boat ourselves. a small, quiet fishing boat with an electric motor. We could watch from a distance, on the water. If we saw anything, we could intervene, or at least have a direct account for the police. It would cost our dwindling cash, and we'd risk being seen by Mark. But doing nothing would cost far more. The marina office opened at 8. We had 30 minutes to wait, every second an agony. At 5 to 8, a familiar black SUV pulled into the marina's private lot on the other side of the office. Mark. He got out, alone. He stretched, then walked toward the docks, a cooler in his hand. He unlocked the gate and walked down to the R&R retreat. He boarded the boat, disappearing into the cabin. My breath caught. He was here. Preparations were starting. But where was Sammy? The question was answered a moment later. A woman's car, a small red sedan, pulled in. Brittany, the girlfriend, got out. She opened the back passenger door and helped Sammy out. He looked small, dressed in a bright blue jacket. He held her hand, walking slowly, his head down. He didn't look around. He just followed her onto the dock. My grandmother's heart screamed to run to him, to snatch him up. Lisa made a small, wounded sound beside me. We were forced to watch, powerless, as our boy was led onto that boat. The cabin door closed behind them. This showed the absolute control Mark held. He had our child, on his boat, on his scheduled day. The law saw him as the custodial parent on a lawful outing. The marina office door opened. The clock was moving. We had to decide, rent a boat and follow, knowing we could be spotted, or stay on land and hope for a miracle. I looked at Lisa's face, etched with a pain I never wanted to see. I opened my car door. "We're going out there," I said. We walked toward the office, two grandmother and mother, about to rent a fishing boat to shadow a monster. Renting the boat was easier than I feared. The young man at the counter was bored. I paid in cash for a 4-hour rental of a small aluminum dinghy with a quiet electric trolling motor. He gave a brief safety spiel, handed me a life vest, and pointed to slip 17. We now needed to get on the water unseen, to position ourselves to watch the pontoon boat. If Mark saw us, everything was over. We motored out slowly, the electric motor a faint hum. I steered us toward a cluster of reeds and small islands on the far side of the main basin, a spot with a long sight line to the marina's main channel. We tucked in, the reeds providing some cover. We waited. The morning grew warm. The pontoon boat remained in its slip. Nothing moved. The tension was a wire pulled tight in my chest. Just after 10 a.m., the R&R retreat's engine rumbled to life. It backed smoothly out of its slip and began moving slowly down the channel toward the open lake. My hand tightened on the tiller. We had to follow at a distance. We let them get a good lead. Then I nudged our boat out and followed, keeping other boats between us when possible. The pontoon boat didn't speed up. It moved at a leisurely pace, heading for the northern, less populated end of the lake. The dread mounted with every yard. This was it. He was taking Sammy to the isolated spot. After 20 minutes, the pontoon boat cut its engine. It drifted to a stop in a wide, empty cove, ringed by tall pines. No other boats were in sight. It was perfect. Quiet and private. We stopped our dinghy 300 yards back, concealed by the point of a small island. We could see the boat clearly through the binoculars I'd brought from home. Mark and Brittany were on deck. Then Mark went into the cabin. He emerged carrying Sammy. He set him down on the deck. Sammy was wearing the bright orange life jacket I'd seen in the duffel bag. Mark pointed to the water, talking. He was putting on a show, a boating safety lesson. My blood ran cold. This was the prelude. He was making Sammy comfortable by the edge, making sure the life jacket was on. establishing a scene for the accident. A child, leaning over, a tragic slip. The jacket might even be faulty, or he might remove it. I couldn't bear to watch, but I couldn't look away. Lisa was crying silently beside me, her fist pressed to her mouth. Then, the shift. Something unexpected. Brittany suddenly stood up, gesturing angrily at Mark. She was shaking her head. She took a step towards Sammy, as if to pull him back from the rail. Mark grabbed her arm, his face contorted in anger we could see even from a distance. They were arguing. The perfect plan had a crack. His accomplice was getting cold feet. The argument on the pontoon boat was my distraction. While Mark and Brittany were focused on each other, Sammy stood alone by the rail, small and rigid in his orange life jacket. He wasn't looking at them. He was looking out across the water, right toward our hiding spot. I had to use their conflict. I had to get Sammy off that boat. To fail would mean Lisa losing her son forever and watching my daughter shatter beyond repair. He controlled everything on that floating stage. He held all the power. I made a decision. I started the electric motor, its hum barely audible. "What are you doing?" Lisa whispered, her voice raw. "We're going over there," I said, steering our dinghy out from behind the island. We would be exposed, a slow-moving target on the open water. But Mark was turned away, yelling at Brittany. We had maybe a minute. We cut through the still water. Halfway there, Mark saw us. His head snapped around. His expression shifted from anger to pure, incredulous rage. He released Brittany's arm and took a step toward the helm, as if to start the engine and flee. But Brittany grabbed his arm again, shouting something. She was still fighting him. It bought us 10 more seconds. Our dinghy bumped against the pontoon boat's white plastic hull. The sound made Sammy turn. He saw me. His eyes, so dull before, went wide. "Nana?" he said, a tiny, hopeful sound. "Sammy? Come to Nana," I said, holding out my arms. He didn't hesitate. He scrambled over the pontoon's low safety rope just as Mark shook Brittany off and lunged. Sammy half jumped, half fell into our dinghy, landing in a heap at Lisa's feet. Lisa gathered him up, sobbing. Mark stood at the rail, his face a mask of fury. "What do you think you're doing? That is kidnapping. I will have you arrested," he screamed. I looked him dead in the eye. "Call the police, Mark," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'd love to explain to them why you took a child to a remote cove after discussing a tragic accident on the phone." I put the motor in reverse, backing us away. His fury froze, replaced by a calculating coldness. He knew I'd heard him. He knew I had something, but he also knew I had no proof a judge would accept. It was a stalemate on the water. We had Sammy, but we were now fugitives in the eyes of the law he controlled. We motored away, leaving him and Brittany standing on the deck. I turned my back on them and focused on getting to shore. I had my grandson, but the war was just beginning. We reached the public boat launch, not the marina. I didn't want another confrontation with Mark at the docks. Lisa held Sammy tightly in the back of the car, wrapped in a blanket, whispering to him. He was quiet, clinging to her. I needed to get us somewhere safe, somewhere Mark wouldn't think to look. Our home was the first place he'd go. We were vulnerable, exhausted, and now technically in violation of a custody order. I drove to the only place I could think of, a no-name motel 30 miles east, off the interstate. I paid cash for a single room with 2 beds. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and bleach. It was a refuge of last resort. Inside, we assessed the damage. Sammy was physically okay, just terribly subdued. Lisa was trembling, running her hands over his hair, his arms, as if to confirm he was real. We had traded our stability for his safety. We were now on the run from the law Mark would surely set in motion. It began with Lisa's phone. It buzzed incessantly. Unknown numbers. Then a text from a number I recognized as Mark's lawyer. "Return the child immediately. You are in contempt of a court order. Criminal charges are being prepared." I took the phone. "We are not returning Sammy to a man who planned to kill him," I typed back. I hit send. It was a declaration of war. Then Sammy shifted beside me. While Lisa was in the shower, trying to wash the panic away, he sat on the motel bed. He reached into the pocket of his little jeans and pulled out a small, damp piece of paper. It was another drawing, crumpled. This one showed the boat. A stick figure man pushing a smaller stick figure into scribbled blue water. And on the back, in shaky capital letters, "Brittany, say no. She cry." My breath caught. He had witnessed the planning. He had evidence in his child's way. And Brittany's cold feet were more than a momentary argument. She had expressed regret to the child. She was a potential crack in Mark's armor. But she was also his accomplice. Would she turn on him to save herself? We had nothing to offer her. All we had was a child's drawing and our word against a lawyer's. The motel room walls felt like they were closing in. We had Sammy, but we were trapped. The next move had to be legal, and it had to be brilliant. I looked at the drawing, then at my sleeping daughter and grandson. I had to find a way to use this. I needed a lawyer of my own, one who wouldn't be intimidated by Mark's connections. I used the motel phone to call the State Bar Association's referral service. I asked for a family law attorney with experience in custody fraud and endangerment. They gave me a name: Susan Garfield. Her office was an hour's drive away. We had to get to Susan Garfield with our story and evidence before Mark could file his kidnapping charges. It would take the last of my savings for the retainer, and we risked being intercepted. We left the motel at dawn, all of us wearing the same clothes from the day before. Sammy sat silently in his car seat, holding his mother's hand. I drove with a constant eye on the rearview mirror, expecting police lights. We reached the small, tidy storefront office of Susan Garfield-esque, just as she was unlocking the door. She was a woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes and no-nonsense grey hair. She listened without interruption for 20 minutes as I laid it out. The custody loss, the staged abduction call, the overheard plan, the rescue on the lake, the drawings. I placed Sammy's 2 drawings on her polished desk. She examined them carefully, then looked at Sammy, who hid his face in Lisa's shoulder. "And the neighbor who saw the limp child?" she asked. "Evelyn Gable? She's terrified of him," I said. Susan steepled her fingers. "What you've done, taking the child, is legally perilous. A judge will not be pleased. However," she said, leaning forward, "if we can prove imminent danger, it becomes justified. The drawings are compelling, but they're hearsay. The neighbor's statement helps. The girlfriend is the key. If she's having second thoughts, we need to get to her before Mark convinces her to stick to their story." She agreed to take the case, structuring her fee so I could pay in installments. Her first action was to draft an emergency motion to modify custody based on endangerment, to be filed by noon. But as she began typing, my phone rang. It was my home number. I answered. It was Mark. His voice was calm, lawyerly, and utterly chilling. "Helen, you have something that belongs to me. I'm at your house. I've called the police. They'll be there soon to take a report. If you bring Sammy back now, I might be persuaded not to press charges against you and Lisa for parental interference. It's your last chance to avoid prison." He hung up, He was at my home, weaponizing the law from my own kitchen. Susan saw my face. What is it? He's at my house. He's called the police on us. Susan's expression hardened. Then we don't have until noon. We file now. And you don't go home. You go to a shelter, a family crisis center. It's a secure location. It also looks better to the court. You're seeking safety, not hiding. She wrote down an address. Our refuge was now an institution. We were entering the system, and I had to hope it would believe a grandmother and a child's crayon drawings over a smooth-talking lawyer. The Family Hope Center was a bland brick building in the city. It felt both safe and like a surrender. We were processed by a kind but weary social worker, given a small room with bunk beds. We were now officially claiming sanctuary. Susan Garfield worked fast. By 2 p.m., she called. She had filed the emergency motion and gotten a hearing before a different judge for 4 p.m. It was a whirlwind. We had to be there. We had to present ourselves as a stable unit seeking protection. We arrived at the courthouse, a place of echoing halls and anxious people. Mark was already there, flanked by his own lawyer. He looked polished and aggrieved. He didn't look at us. Brittany was not with him. The hearing was in a small chamber. Judge Henderson was a stern woman with reading glasses perched on her nose. She listened as Mark's lawyer outlined a tale of a grandmother and mother unhinged by grief, violently kidnapping a child from a lawful recreational outing, causing the child tremendous trauma. Then Susan spoke. She presented the emergency motion, outlining the history. She submitted the drawings as evidence of the child's state of mind and fear. She mentioned the witness, Evelyn Gable, and the police report that was too quickly closed. She stated our belief that Mark had planned to stage a fatal accident to irrevocably harm Lisa and gain full control of her assets. Mark's lawyer objected vehemently. Fantasy. Slander. There is no evidence of this outrageous plot, only the hysterical interpretations of a bitter ex-wife and her interfering mother. The judge looked at Sammy, who was curled on Lisa's lap. I need to speak to the child, in my chambers, with a court advocate present. It was a standard procedure, but it filled me with dread. Sammy was so quiet. Would he speak? Would he be too scared? They took Sammy away. The 15 minutes we waited were the longest of my life. Mark stared straight ahead, a confident smirk playing on his lips. He thought he had won. He thought a scared little boy would say nothing. The door opened. The court advocate, a gentle-looking woman, came out with Sammy. She nodded to the judge. Judge Henderson returned to the bench. She adjusted her glasses and looked at Mark, then at us. The child is articulate for his age, she began. He stated he was afraid of his father. He said his father told him they were playing a special game where he would go in the water and not come up. He said Aunt Brittany got mad and cried. He confirmed he made the drawings. She paused. This, combined with the peculiarities of the prior police report and the sworn statement from the neighbor regarding the child's condition that night, creates a compelling picture of profound risk. She granted our emergency motion for temporary sole custody to Lisa, with supervised visitation for Mark, suspended pending a full psychological evaluation. A restraining order was issued. Mark was ordered to stay away from us all. Mark's smirk vanished. He stood up, his face red. This is a travesty. His lawyer shushed him urgently. We had won the battle. But as we walked out of the courthouse, Susan pulled me aside. He'll appeal. He'll fight dirty. And we still need Brittany. Without her testimony to corroborate the plan, this is still a fragile victory. The war wasn't over. We had a temporary shield, but Mark was still out there, and he had just been publicly humiliated. A man like him would not let that stand. We moved back into my house, the temporary custody order a piece of paper that felt both powerful and flimsy. Sammy began to talk a little more, but he had nightmares. Lisa jumped at every sound. Our victory left us in a state of constant, vigilant fear. Susan Garfield was pushing the district attorney's office to investigate Mark for conspiracy or endangerment. But without Brittany, they were hesitant. She was the missing piece. Then a new threat arrived. A letter came, official-looking. It was from the bank holding the mortgage on Lisa's house, the house she'd gotten in the divorce, the one Mark had always coveted. The letter stated that loan payments were seriously delinquent and foreclosure proceedings were imminent. Lisa was bewildered. I set up automatic payments. He handled the finances during the marriage, but I set it up myself after the divorce. We went to the bank. After an hour of escalating frustration, a manager discovered the truth. 2 months ago, the automatic payments had been cancelled. A phone call, verified with the correct security answers, Lisa's mother's maiden name, Sammy's birthday, had authorized the cancellation. The payments stopped. The bank sent notices to the house, but Mark had been collecting the mail before Lisa could see it. He had been engineering her financial collapse in parallel to his other plans. It was another form of violence, slow and bureaucratic. He was systematically destroying her life from every angle. We reinstated the payments, but the foreclosure process had already started. It would cost thousands in legal fees to stop it. That evening, everything changed. My doorbell rang. I peered through the peephole. A young woman, her eyes swollen from crying, stood on my porch. It was Brittany. She was alone. "I need to talk to someone," she said, her voice barely a whisper when I opened the door. I didn't know it would go this far. He said it was just to scare Lisa, to get her to sign over the house. He never said he'd actually... I let her in. Lisa gripped Sammy protectively, glaring. Brittany wouldn't look at them. She sat at my kitchen table, twisting a napkin. "He's furious. At me. At you. At the judge. He's talking about other ways. He says he'll ruin you all. He mentioned something about adult protective services, about having you declared incompetent, Helen." A cold trickle of fear ran down my spine. It was a classic move. Isolate the grandmother, get her declared unfit, gain control. He was shifting his focus to me. "Will you testify?" I asked quietly. "Will you tell the police what he planned?" She cried harder. "He'll destroy me. He has things on me. Stupid things I said in texts." "He's going to destroy you anyway," I said, my voice firm. "You're a liability to him now. Your only way out is through the truth." I pushed a notepad and pen toward her. "Write it down. Everything. Dates, what he said, about the phone call I overheard, about the accident. Sign and date it." She looked at the paper, then at my face. The weight of her decision hung in the air. She picked up the pen. She started to write. We had our witness. But as her pen moved, I knew this would trigger Mark's final, most desperate play. He would come for me now, not with a boat or a court order, but with whispers and paperwork, aiming to have me taken away from my own family. The battlefield had just changed. The written confession from Brittany was a frail stack of papers on my kitchen table. It detailed everything. Mark's idea to use the fake abduction call to scare Lisa, his plan for a boating accident, his cold explanation that Sammy's tragic death would make Lisa compliant. She signed and dated every page. I needed to get this to Susan Garfield and then to the police to finally end this. By staying put, we were making ourselves a visible target again. It arrived not with a shout, but with a polite knock 2 days later. A woman in a crisp blazer stood on my porch, a man in a collared shirt beside her. They showed identification. Adult Protective Services. They had received a concerning report, they said. Could they come in to discuss my well-being? My blood went cold. Mark's threat was in motion. I let them in, my mind racing. They asked gentle, probing questions. Did I feel safe at home? Was I having trouble managing my medications or finances? Was my daughter pressuring me? They mentioned cognitive lapses, reported by a concerned family member. They were painting a picture of a confused, exploited, elderly woman. I served them tea, my hands steady. I presented my own picture. I showed them the family photos, my meticulously organized medication box, my filed tax returns. I spoke clearly about my daily routine, my volunteer work at the library before all this. I was demonstrating competence, but it was a defensive performance. They took notes, their faces unreadable. After they left, promising a follow-up, I called Susan. "He's using the system," she said grimly. "If APS substantiates a finding of self-neglect or exploitation, they could petition for a temporary conservatorship. He could end up controlling you, and thus access to Lisa and Sammy again." The call came from an unexpected place. My friend Marge, the quilter, phoned. Her sister worked in the APS office. She couldn't share details, but she said, off the record, "Sometimes, when there's a custody battle, these reports fly. They look for consistency. A one-off report from a disgruntled ex-son-in-law might not hold water if the subject is clearly coherent and has support. But if there are multiple reports, even anonymous ones, it builds a case." Multiple reports. He would keep filing. He would recruit others. I couldn't just defend. I had to make him stop. I looked at Brittany's confession. It was no longer just a weapon for court. It was a shield for my own autonomy. I needed to use it to show APS that the reporter was not a concerned relative, but a manipulator attempting to commit fraud. I had to go on the offensive within their system. I started drafting a formal, point-by-point rebuttal to the allegations. With Brittany's statement as Exhibit A, I delivered my rebuttal package to the APS supervisor, with a copy to Susan Garfield. It included Brittany's confession, the temporary custody order, and a timeline of Mark's actions. I stated clearly that the report was a retaliatory fabrication in an ongoing criminal conspiracy. It was a risk. I was accusing my accuser of a crime. If they didn't believe me, I looked paranoid. The assault shifted form. Lisa received a call from Sammy's school. A man identifying himself as a child psychologist, working with the family court, requested Sammy's records and asked to observe him in class. The school, cautious, called Lisa for verification. It was a lie. No such psychologist was appointed. Mark was probing for new angles, trying to infiltrate Sammy's world. Then, a letter arrived from the county clerk. A hearing was scheduled regarding the APS investigation. Mark had petitioned the court, using the initial APS report as grounds, for an emergency evaluation of my capacity to provide a safe environment for my daughter and grandson, who were living with me. He was using the very system designed to protect the vulnerable as a cudgel. The hearing was in 72 hours. Fighting this drained the last of my emotional reserve. I was so tired. Lisa begged me to let her and Sammy leave, to remove the threat I posed. I refused. Running would only validate his lies. Susan prepared for the hearing, but she was worried. These capacity hearings are tricky. They rely heavily on the opinion of a court-appointed evaluator. We need to discredit the source of the petition before the evaluator even meets you. We got our break. Brittany, fortified by her decision to confess, had done something brave. She had gone back to the marina, and spoken to the staff member we'd met. She got a written statement from him confirming that Mark had rented the boat for a single day, not a week, and had been asking detailed questions about the lake's deepest, most isolated areas. She also found a text message from Mark, sent the morning of the boat trip. She forwarded it to Susan. It read, "Remember, it's just a safety drill. But accidents happen. Stay on script." It was the closest thing to a smoking gun we had. It wasn't a confession of murder, but it was evidence of premeditated deceit regarding a child's safety. Susan immediately filed it with the court and sent it to the district attorney's office, pushing again for criminal charges. Now, we had something to show the judge in the capacity hearing. The petitioner was under active investigation for conspiring to endanger a child. The ground was finally shifting under Mark's feet. The capacity hearing was in a different, smaller courtroom. Mark was there, looking pale and tense. His lawyer seemed less confident. The court-appointed evaluator, a soft-spoken man named Dr. Evans, was also present. Judge Henderson took the bench again. She acknowledged the new, serious documents filed by Susan Garfield. She looked at Mark. "Mr. Dowling, you are the petitioner in this matter regarding Mrs. Helen's capacity, yet I have before me a sworn statement from your former associate alleging you conspired to stage a dangerous incident involving your son. I also have a text message from you that raises profound questions. How do you reconcile this?" Mark's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, these are fabricated documents from a vengeful ex-girlfriend, part of a coordinated smear campaign by the respondent's family. The text message came from your client's own phone number," the judge said flatly. She turned to Dr. Evans. "Doctor, given these extraordinary circumstances, I am suspending this capacity evaluation. The petition is denied without prejudice. The court's primary concern is the child's safety, which is already addressed under a separate order." She then looked at Mark. "Mr. Dowling, you are to have no further contact with Mrs. Helen Carter. Any further filings will be viewed as vexatious litigation. I am forwarding all these materials to the district attorney." It was a rout. Mark's legal assault was over. The gavel fell. As we walked out, Mark brushed past me in the hallway. He didn't look at me. He hissed one sentence, low and venomous. "You think you've won? You just ruined your daughter's life. I'll see to it." It was the last gasp of a defeated man, but it chilled me. He would look for other ways, indirect ways, to cause pain. He would never truly stop. 2 weeks later, the district attorney's office called Susan. Based on the evidence, they were charging Mark with criminal conspiracy to commit endangerment and filing a false police report. It was a felony. His law license was suspended pending the outcome. The foreclosure on Lisa's house was stopped after we provided evidence of fraud to the bank. The immediate war was over. We were safe, legally and physically. But the silence in my house felt heavy. Lisa was healing, but jumpy. Sammy still had nightmares. We had survived the storm, but the landscape was forever changed. I sat in my quiet living room, the legal papers stacked neatly on the coffee table. I had used every tool I had: a grandmother's patience, a mother's fury, a woman's cunning, to protect my family. I had won. So why did I feel so hollow? The hollow feeling lasted a month. It was the quiet after the siege, where every sound felt like a threat that never came. Then, one Saturday, Lisa and Sammy came over to bake cookies, an old tradition we'd abandoned. Sammy was mixing dough, his small hands covered in flour. He laughed at something Lisa said, a real, clear laugh that didn't end in a whimper. I watched them from the kitchen table. The legal documents were filed away in a cabinet. Mark was out on bail, awaiting trial, barred from contacting us. His power was broken, Brittany's testimony would seal his fate. The system, slow and flawed, had finally worked because we forced it to look. Lisa brought me a cup of tea. She sat beside me. "He's starting play therapy next week," she said softly, nodding to Sammy. "He drew a picture for you." She handed me a new drawing. It showed our house, with 3 stick figures holding hands, a big yellow sun in the corner, no scribbled water, no angry faces. This was what we had fought for. Not a dramatic courtroom victory speech, but a child's drawing of a sunny day. Not the ruin of my enemy, though that was coming, but the rebuilding of my family. The true victory was in this: the smell of baking cookies, the sound of a laugh, the return of simple, unafraid moments in my own kitchen. I would never forget the fear. I would always lock my doors. But as I taped Sammy's new drawing to the refrigerator next to the grocery list, I felt a sense of weary peace. I had done what I needed to do. I had protected my own. The struggle had etched new lines on my face and a permanent watchfulness behind my eyes. But it had been worth it. I sipped my tea, warm and familiar, and listened to my family in the next room. The fight was over. Our life, the quiet, precious life we had fought for, was finally beginning again.